We're in the middle of the fifth chapter of Ketubot, which is really the chapter that kind of outlines the different obligations of a marriage. And we've just looked at a Mishnah that dealt with the case of a person, a man, actually, a husband, that dedicated his wife's, Ma'aseh Yadeha, his wife's work to the temple. And the question that this Mishnah is addressing is really, what kind of economic ownership does a husband have over what his wife does? And there's some basic assumption running through the Mishnah that there will be an exchange, that he is obliged to maintain her, but in exchange for that, her output, if you like, comes into his economic domain. And of course, that raises the question, well, what kind of output are we talking about? And the fifth Mishnah then picks up. So these are the kinds of work or the kinds of creation, really interesting reference maybe to the creation of the world. These are the creations that a wife does for her husband. And then there's a whole list of the kind of things you might expect in the society of the Mishnah, where a wife was at home. Tochenet ve'ofa, umchabeset, umvashelet, umenika et bena, umatzah et amita ve'osa v'tzamer. Grinding, baking, washing, cooking, nursing her child, her child, preparing the bed, and working in wool. That's very significant. We're going to come back to that, working in wool. If she brought one slave woman into the marriage, so maybe this is a rich wife, and as part of her ketubah, she's actually bringing a whole bunch of things into the marriage, including someone who can help around the house. So if she brings one slave woman into the house, into the house, she doesn't grind or bake or wash. Two, she doesn't cook and doesn't nurse her child. Again, that's really interesting. And I think 18th century, 19th century Britain was very similar, that if you were a kind of middle-class woman, you wouldn't nurse your own children. You get someone else to do that. Shalosh, eina matzat amita. Three, she doesn't put out the bed. Arba, yoshevet, b'katedra. Four, she sits in a katedra. A katedra is, well, it's actually translated here by Safaria as a chair, but a katedra is more than a chair. The word is cognate with the English word cathedral. For example, the chair of a professor in the Hebrew university is called a katedra. It's not just a chair. It's a kind of, it's this kind of chair you would put at the head of the table. Let's say it's a chair that belongs to someone of importance and stature. Arba Yoshevet b'katedra. She sits in a katedra. And now Rabbi Eliezer is actually going to come back and comment on the working in wool. Rabbi Eliezer Omer, afilu hichnisa lo me'a shifra kofa la'asot batzamer. Even if she brought in 100 slave women, he makes her work in wool. Because idleness leads to promiscuity. So Rabbi Eliezer has this view that women are kind of intrinsically liable to promiscuity. That's, by the way, why he doesn't allow them to be taught Torah. He thinks that if you, and it will see the Mishnah in Sota, if you teach your daughter Torah, you're teaching her promiscuity. We'll see that Mishnah. And we'll come back to this later. Let's just finish the Mishnah. Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel Omer, Af hamadir tishto mila asot manata yotzi v'yitein ketubot shehabatala v'yalidei shamu. Rabban Gamliel said, if a man forbade his wife to do any work, so this is the opposite way around. This is not the husband forcing his wife to do work, but the husband forbidding his wife to do any work. At that point, he has to divorce her and give her her ketubah. Shehabatala meviyah lidei shamum. Shamum is some kind of, it's translated here as insanity, but it's basically, it's a mental illness. It's a mental illness. So Rabbi Gamliel says that work is positive. Rabbi Eliezer says that work keeps you away from sin. And I couldn't resist bringing actually the story of the lady who asked quite a deep question of Rabbi Eliezer about the episode of the golden calf. Why did the people of the golden calf, although their sin was the same, die in 3 separate ways? And it's a deep question because the text really only implies 2 different ways, through the plague and through the sword. So it's up to the Midrash to bring the third. So this is a woman who clearly knows Midrash, right? So she's not this is not a simple question. Anyway, he says to her, Ein chochmata shel isha ela b'filcha dichtiv b'chol isha chachmat lev b'yadeha tavu. Every wise-hearted woman spun yarn with her hands. The wisdom of a woman is only in her spinning. So he seems to have this idea that women spend their time spinning, and maybe that keeps them away from sin. And he's going to later in this little sugya, he says, Yisrafu divrei Torah ve'el yimseru l'nashim. Let words of Torah be burnt rather than be sent out to women. He has a very strong view here about the danger that women can get into if they learn Torah. Now, Rabban Gamliel says if a man vows to not let his wife work, he has to give her ketubah. What about other vows? A man vowed not to have sex with his wife. And at this point, he has to give her ketubah as well, because he's obliged under Torah law. We'll see in a minute how often under Torah law he's actually obliged to provide that to his wife, as well as her normal maintenance. But there's a question as to how soon he has to give her ketubah, and it's as if the Mishnah wants to prescribe some kind of cooling off period, maybe a little bit of a cooling off period. So the Mishnah doesn't. I mean, divorce is an event is a tragic event, and the Mishnah is not going to trigger divorce immediately. Beit Shammai omrim shtei Shabbatot. So Beit Shammai say 2 Shabbatot or 2 weeks. Beit Hillel omrim Shabbat echat. Beit Hillel says, if this only lasts for 1 week, he has to divorce her. What about other kinds of professions? If a student goes away to learn Torah without permission, this is without the permission of his wife, shloshim yom, he can be away 30 days. This is before he has to give her ketubah. I went away for just under 30 days this time last year. V'hapoel Shabbat achat. Workers, 1 week. Ha'onah ha'amura b'Torah, the time for kind of mandatory conjugal rights in the Torah. By the way, this is not specified anywhere in the Torah, but the Mishnah is saying
We learn it out from the Torah. So from the Mishnah, right? It's in the Torah, but it's drush. It's drush. It's not pshat. Haona murab Torah. Tayalim b'choyal. For men, a tayal is someone who doesn't have to work for his living. I've translated here as men of independent income. If you don't have to work for your living, effectively you're on demand every single day. Hatayalim b'choyal. Hapoalim shtayim b'shabbat. Workers twice a week. V'chamarim achat b'shabbat. Donkey drivers once a week. V'hagamalim achat l'shloshim yom. Camel drivers once in 30 days. I presume this is because camel drivers are really traveling a long way away over the desert with their camels, so they're only back once a month. V'hasapanim achat l'shisha chodeshim. And sailors once in 6 months, because they're away for a long time. And these are the words of Rabbi Eliezer, Divrei Rabbi Eliezer.